The topic of the Atlantic slave trade has resurfaced with the release of the movie The Woman King. However, I have become increasingly disappointed in the dialogue surrounding this complex topic. While it may not be fair to expect any individual to present the full scope of the issue, social and political ideologies have tainted the conversation. Although I have discussed this topic before, I hope that this video can provide the best historical delineation of the events of the Atlantic slave trade. Hello, awesome team! Welcome back to another video on African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you are contributing to the creation of these videos. The link to Patreon is in the description box below. As I mentioned, I've covered the topic of the Atlantic slave trade before, but the release of The Woman King seems to have intensified the dialogue. I wanted to wait for the discussion to settle down before addressing it. People from diverse backgrounds engaged in the debate, presenting evidence for their perspectives. However, most of them make a critical error. I want to clarify that this video is not intended to excuse or condemn the roles of Africans or Europeans in the Atlantic slave trade. Rather, its purpose is to understand the history from a proper historical perspective. It serves as a broad summary of findings accumulated over years of studying historical African data. A more in-depth analysis would require a series of videos. The discussions on the Atlantic slave trade are often tainted by social or political agendas, which detracts from an objective examination of the topic. Two common statements emerge from these debates: blacks were selling blacks and they sold us into slavery. The former is typically made by people outside the diaspora, while the latter is a grievance from within the diaspora. The critical error lies in assuming a Pan-African model when discussing these statements. Such a model is a modern invention and not applicable to historical contexts. It is erroneous to impose the concept of blackness as we know it today on ancient, medieval, or post-medieval Africa. In those times, people identified more with their specific language, culture, and religion. Furthermore, the grievance by the African diaspora of Africans sold us into slavery is disingenuous because many descendants of African ethnic groups were both victims and victimizers. The topic is incredibly stratified and cannot be simplified under a Pan-African framework. Selective courtesy is at play here. It involves acknowledging and respecting the differences between European ethnic groups while overlooking the same among African ethnic groups. European history is recognized to have diverse languages, cultures, and worldviews, yet the same is not applied to African history. For instance, the experiences of Portuguese travelers like Cadamoso and Pedro de Sintra in West Africa demonstrate that Pan-Africanism was useless in 15th century Africa. They encountered Southern West Atlantic language speakers, a group entirely new to them and their African interpreters.